Hi, my name is Sarah Braasch, and I am the PhD candidate in philosophy at Yale who was falsely accused of racism and whose life was destroyed by the Yale administration, the press, and a global internet rage mob. So before we get started, I just want to thank you for coming back to watch another video of mine. I am holding the camera still in my hand, so I'm going to try to hold it as still as possible, and I am going to be reading from a script, so that's why I'll be glancing off camera. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So today I want to talk about why anyone in their right mind would think that the appropriate way for our society to settle disputes, either civil or criminal, would be via roving online mobs of moral outrage warriors who respond to the least provocation or mere accusation by destroying private citizen strangers' lives and by driving them to suicide and inciting their murders with no due process whatsoever. Pretty much everything you've heard and read about me is a straight-up bald-faced lie, but let's imagine for a moment that it isn't. Let's imagine that I came upon a random sleeping black person in the middle of the night in my Yale dormitory common room, and I immediately dialed 911 because this occurrence seemed suspicious to me. That is not at all what happened, but let's just imagine for a moment that it is. Who in their right mind thinks that the appropriate response is to destroy my life, livelihood, and reputation, as well as incite my murder and drive me to suicide without any opportunity for me to defend myself or to tell my side of the story with no due process whatsoever? That is utter insanity. Both the left and the right have come to realize that we simply cannot make it impossible for people to create lives for themselves post-incarceration. Criminal justice reform was the one truly bipartisan effort. But we think that it's okay for roving online mobs of moral outrage warriors to destroy people's lives for non-criminal offenses like smirking or wearing a MAGA hat or calling the campus police. The typical retort is that this behavior is fine because due process is only required during criminal proceedings instituted by the government. But due process is also a requirement in civil courts, and our civil courts exist so that people will feel confident about interacting with one another in the public space, making contracts, engaging in business, and establishing social relationships. And they feel confident because they know that they can be made whole if they are harmed. And this is not harmed in a way that is criminal. There is no question of criminal liability, but there is still a responsibility to compensate someone for whatever damages they may have suffered. The roving online moral outrage mobs obviate not only the criminal courts, but the civil courts as well. Besides the inevitable death threats and threats of violence, including sexual violence, they behave as if any defamation tort laws simply don't apply to them, because it is currently difficult to hold them accountable as our legal system has yet to catch up to social media technology. This is doing profound damage to our society, to our legal system, and to our democracy. If people are too terrified to enter the public sphere and to engage in normal economic and social discourse and interactions and relationships because they know that their entire lives can be destroyed on a whim, by a mere accusation, or by a couple of minutes of illegally recorded and edited video, then they will simply stop entering the public sphere. They will stop engaging in normal economic and social discourse and interactions and relationships, but that will lead to the degradation and eventual collapse of our society. Not to mention what people being too terrified to engage in political discourse will do to our democracy. If every time you speak political speech and make a political statement, you risk having your life destroyed, with no recourse to the civil courts and no way to be compensated and made whole, then people will simply stop participating in the political process. This is what the moral outrage warriors want. They want to silence any opposition. They want to do away with the democratic political process and free speech and civil liberties. They want to implement their brand of ideological fascism. Thank you so much for spending a few moments with me.